Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome to this week's virtual plant clinic. And welcome to the first virtual plant clinic of 2025 because we're in a new year now. Good morning, welcome. My name is Bill Lester. I'm with University of Florida Extension here in Hernando County, kind of chilly Hernando County this morning. And with me is our Hernando County Florida Friendly Landscape Coordinator, Colby. Good morning, Colby. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Okay. And one of our Master Gardener volunteers, Bernie. Bernie, how you doing today?
I'm doing very well.
Okay. Hey, guys, as always, if you have any lawn and garden questions, any comments, any good morning. See, we even got a first good morning here. Anything at all, just go ahead and put them in the comments, and we'll go ahead and show them, and we'll do our very best to answer your questions this morning. So, hey guys, starting the other day, every time I go on Facebook, every other post is about some kind of huge polar vortex, and it's supposed to be like record-breaking cold, and everybody's talking about the chances of snow in Florida, snow flurries at Disney, which is probably not going to happen, but people like to talk about that anyway. So, I thought this year was supposed to be a weak La Nina, and it was supposed to be warmer than usual and drier than usual. And I planted fall tomatoes this year, and now I'm having to pull buckets and buckets of green tomatoes and make stuff out of them because we have this huge cold front coming. So, you guys ready for the cold?
No, my wife is involved in the big dog show. Runs for 2 weeks coming up, and that's not what they want. That's going to be a big mess. So hopefully it won't be as bad here in Florida as they say. Otherwise, all the Yankees that came down to the dog show to get into the warm are going to be upset and complain.
Well, I can tell you now, any of the Huskies in the dog show will be loving the cold weather. So.
Yeah.
I'm
the
not.
Mexican hairless won't like it.
No.
It's yeah. I don't like the cold. This is too. It was too cold for me this morning, and they say it's going to get worse, and I'm like, man, ugh.
Yeah, it was only like 45 or so this morning.
That's too cold.
I walked outside. I swear it felt like 25. I was freezing. I'm still cold right now. So
if it gets under 50, it might as well be below freezing. It's miserable. Ugh.
This is bad. The heater fan on my car quit, and it's computer controlled. So how do you even go about troubleshooting it?
I don't know.
I don't either.
Well, from the few things that I've seen, and they keep making references to comparing the weather forecast and the tracks and everything right now to back in the 1980s, and historically, some of the numbers I've seen, like upper 20s in Tampa Bay, which means will be colder. We base our plant selection here in Hernando County loosely on the zone that we're in and the average low temperature during the winter. And we try to pick plants that are going to, survive our average cold. And even if they're not going to survive it, people grow bananas, tropical plants, tropical fruit trees. If you know that in advance, well, I'm probably going to have to cover them or do something a couple nights this coming winter. When we start to get down into the 20s and the teens, all bets are off. It's literally every plant for itself. So, you can go out there and cover it, and it will help, but it may not make enough of a difference to save your plant. And it really depends on the exact plant, the species, where it is in your yard, how cold your yard gets. I can guarantee you the coldest temperature in my yard is going to be a degree different from Colby's, and we live in the same town, and probably a couple degrees different from Bernie because he lives in like the next town over. So it's really difficult for us to give blanket recommendations for, what to do when it's going to get cold, because we don't know how cold it's going to get. and it's going to save all my plants. There's no guarantees that that's going to happen. So this might be, if it pans out to be as cold as they say it might be, like I said, guys, all bets are kind of off. But Bassam actually has a good question here about caring for Christmas cactus or Christmas cacti after they flower, and what kind of fertilizer to use and when. So, Bernie, you want to flip a coin, you or me?
About half a teaspoon of Osmocote works great. Works miracles for just about anything you have potted.
That's all a Christmas cactus is going to need. They're not like real fertilizer hogs, just light fertilization. Very important with Christmas cactus. You can put them outdoors when the weather warms up. Don't put them outside when it's going to be 18 degrees overnight. It'll freeze. But during the warmer time of the year, you can put it outside. Put it in a physical location where it doesn't get rained on. Because if you give it all the rain that comes down during the summer, they will drown, they will get root rot, and they will die. So Christmas cacti definitely like to be kept on the dry side. So if you put it like on a porch under an overhang, I had some where we had a porch with an overhang and I put them out there. They were in the shade. They got a little bit of light. I controlled the water. When it rained, they didn't get rained on. And they did beautifully for years. They grew. If you have a happy Christmas cactus, it will grow like a weed and do beautifully.
You know, the last really big set of freezes we had was in the 80s. And we had 3 really hard freezes in one 10-year period. And it actually changed the way Florida looks today. People don't realize it, but what was citrus north of Interstate 4 pretty much disappeared, and it all became housing. So if it hadn't been for those freezes, there wouldn't been the property available, and the housing in Central Florida would have taken on a totally different character. We've only had a couple of really hard freezes like that since. So there are a lot of people, approaching middle age that are native Floridians that have never seen a hard freeze. And of course, we're old enough, we look back and remember what happens. You know, it's not possible to protect the outdoor plants when that really happens. If it goes into the mid-teens, pretty much everything you have outside that is subtropical is a goner. So,
Yep. I remember.
Go ahead.
Back in the 80s, even things that you would never think that you would have a problem with froze and died. I know city of Orlando had planted a large number of queen palm trees around Orlando to, make it look tropical and nice. And queen palm trees, what's the lowest temperature they could take? They could take a little bit below, they could take below freezing, but not by a lot. When you get down to the teens, what it does is it doesn't kill the tree outright. It damages it so that you end up with a lot of vertical cracks and splits in the trunk. And it may not be until like late spring, early summer where you notice that your queen palm is split, it's oozing, it's dying, and you're going to have to remove the palm. So they lost huge numbers of queen palms in Orlando where, any other winter they would never normally have a problem with it.
Yeah, you start rupturing cell walls. Plumeria is a good example. Plumeria, if it gets 30 degrees here, your plumeria gets killed to the ground. But if it gets to 20 degrees, your plumeria is mush, and that's over. There's no return on most of those plants. So, this is why I so often tell people, if you like those subtropicals and tropicals, they're fine to plant them, but don't spend really big money on them. You spend $4,000, $5,000 on one of the palm trees that shouldn't be here. That's an expensive thing to look at. And not only have you spent the money to have it planted, now you're going to have to spend the money to have somebody come take it away. So, uh, you know, and because we've gone so long, some of these plants have gotten really, really big. You know, there's some uh, 30, 40-foot plants out there that if we get a really hard freeze are going to die. And people are going to be very surprised again.
Yeah, and I know over the years people have kind of pushed the limits of where different tropical fruits will grow. We have more people further north trying to grow mangoes, avocados, a lot of fruit crops that will do well for a number of years when we have, just a little frost, maybe just one cold night during the winter. But when you start getting extremely low temperatures, if it ever does hit like 20 degrees in Tampa, the mangoes along in Tarpon Springs are going to lose an awful lot of mango trees. If you're near the water, it stays a little warmer. If you're able to cover it, that helps. If you can, and I know a year or two ago, I had somebody in my neighborhood that had some kind of, I think it might have been a carambola tree, and they did a beautiful job of building a little square structure, covering it, making a little mini greenhouse. They put a light inside to help keep it a little bit warmer, and it still suffered a lot of damage. It didn't kill it, but it got a lot of damage. So hopefully we won't get quite that cold.
The other thing to remember is it's the heat out of the ground that's protecting the plants. The plants don't generate heat. They're not like people. They're not sit there burning enough calories that they're producing heat. So if you wrap something like a lollipop, uh, you're actually providing it with no protection whatsoever. It's the tinting it so that the heat coming up out of the ground protects the plant. So uh, that's important. And you see so often that people have everything in their yard wrapped like a lollipop, and they're getting by with it because those plants would have survived whether they did anything or not. But uh, at 20 degrees, that doesn't happen any longer.
Yeah, and keep in mind, there are plenty of plants that might be in your landscape that take really cold temperatures. If they grow in New Jersey, they're going to take whatever the coldest we ever get here is. So on a really cold morning, I'm driving to work. I see people that have covered their holly bushes, their viburnums, their ligustrums. They take temperatures, below what we're ever going to get here. So you don't have to worry about covering them, but all the tropicals, subtropicals, sensitive plants, those are the ones that you need to try to cover.
Yeah, and the other thing about it is if you've got it tinted, you've got it properly covered, and the temperature goes to, let's say, 18 degrees, you might get by with it one night. The ground doesn't run out of heat immediately, so it sits there and it keeps radiating for a while. But if we get one of those uh, like we had in the 80s, like 89, where it was 18 degrees for 3 days, the ground runs out of heat. And at that point, you're no longer protecting anything. You're just covering a dead plant. So it depends on how cold and how long and how well protected. There's a lot more to it than just, the old smudge pot thing. Smudge pots only work under certain conditions. So,
and the blowers they used to have in citrus groves, it was basically an engine out of an airplane.
Yeah.
That they put up on a stand like 20, 30 feet up in the air. All that was designed to do was move the air around a grove so that you're moving the warm air around. And I think that's mostly what it did. Sometimes, if you drive way out in the country, you'll still see a few of them out there. I think I read once before all the carburetors have been stolen out of them, so none of them work anymore. So that's not going to work well in your yard. But hey, we got a question here about what can we start indoors now? So what should we be starting now, figuring it's New Year's for spring, even though spring is obviously not here yet and maybe kind of a long ways off. Um, I know what I would always normally start if you have a vegetable garden. You could start seeds for creating your own transplants for tomatoes, peppers, and eggplants. You could start those right now. And you're going to want to take them outside on a warm, sunny day. If it's going to get cold that night, you're going to have to bring them all inside, keep them warm, because they will all either freeze if it gets down to freezing or below, or if it gets cold enough, even above freezing, it's going to damage your little tiny seedlings. But put them out when it's nice, bring them in when it's cold. You're going to keep doing that. And then hopefully late February, early March, when you need those tomato, pepper, and eggplant starts for your vegetable garden, you're already going to have nice, good-sized, healthy plants ready to go in the ground. Bernie, any other ideas what you could start now?
Well, the thing to think about is that if you look at the seed package, it gives you a time to production. So if you're doing a warm season garden here, as a general rule, June 1st is going to be about the end of that garden period. So if you have a plant that takes 60 days to produce, that means that at the end of 60 days, you're going to start getting some product. Well, if you want to have that product for a 2-month period, if you want to be able to pick that for a couple of months, that means we're going to have to back up June, be May, April. Now we've got to come back our 60 days for our starts. So it puts you someplace in January to do your starts. If you have something that is only 27 days to production, you can start a month later. So the time to production, figure out when you want to start picking this, or when would be a reasonable time to start picking that plant, and assume that the end point of that plant is going to be weather related June 1st. So that works pretty well on most of the seeds.
And remember, the seasons are very different here in Florida, so you can't base it on when you started things up in up in the Northeast or up north, or your vegetable garden up there would really be taking off in June. You're picking all your tomatoes in July and August, because here you're right, by maybe middle of June, your tomatoes and a lot of those vegetable crops that you grow in the spring are done. It gets too hot, too wet, too steamy, too many diseases, too many bugs, and you're not going to win that battle. So grow those things earlier in the spring so that you're actually successful and get something.
The university has a publication for people that would like to know when to plant things. I have a copy of it here. This is the Florida Vegetable Gardening Guide. And if you just Google Florida Vegetable Gardening Guide, UF, for University of Florida, it comes back. It gives you recommendations on what varieties work well and when to plant them. And it also tells you when plant if you're in the south, central, or northern part of the state. It's a beautiful document. And if you aren't an experienced gardener, that's probably the most important single piece of paper that you can get your hands on. It has pretty much all the information you need to start being successful. Won't guarantee success, but it's probably the best one single source of information to get you going.
And I went ahead and pulled up the link and shared it in the comments. So I believe that's still the #1 most downloaded publication from University of Florida. So very, very good guide. Has all the times. And like you said, Bernie, It has different times for North Florida, Central Florida, and South Florida because they're all different.
Yeah, timing is probably the number one difference in gardening between here and the northern area. You know, once you're north of Georgia, if you're from an area north of Georgia, basically everything you did from that point farther north doesn't work in Florida. It's just it is so dramatic. You can almost draw a line and say, do this on one side of the line, do this on the other side of the line, and the two just do not intermix at all. So you need the information, and that's probably the best starting spot that we've got.
And you can remember with that specific article, all that information is going to be contained in the tables at the bottom. So if you just like scan it, because it's easy to miss if you don't know what you're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
Like you'll read it, and there's no calendar or anything like that at the bottom. There's these little links that say view tables, and all that information. Because if they included the tables, man, that'd be a big old
tables
page.
are in there.
Yep. Well,
yeah, they lay them out differently than they used to in your store.
If you print it out,
that one too.
If they print it out, they're in there. But if you don't print the article, like download the PDF, you have to click on it to open them. Just FYI, if you're scanning that.
Yeah, do it as a PDF.
And here we go. We will actually show you if here. Well, here is the Florida Vegetable Gardening Guide, and if you scroll down, gives you some very good. These are all the things that you really need to start with and keep in mind. The site, you know, where you're going to put your garden, coming up with the plan, preparing the soil. You're going to need compost or organic matter, all depending on what kind of soil you would actually have. Most all of us have very, very sandy soil, very low organic matter, and you're going to need that organic matter in your soil for vegetables, especially to grow well. But if you keep going down and down and down, starting your own starts, this really does have everything you need. And at the very bottom, we see tables. So planting guide for Florida vegetables, suggestive varieties for vegetable gardens. And you don't have to go by the suggestive varieties. Those are just more traditional varieties that are successful in Florida. Don't be afraid to try new crops or new varieties. I know I've grown tomatoes for many years, and I every year I try new varieties of tomatoes to see if there's something that's going to do very, very well in my garden, depending on where I live. Maybe a different colored cherry tomato, one that tastes different or better. So don't be afraid to experiment. And then products that are currently labeled for insect and mite management in home vegetable gardens. So let's see if we'll, there we go, yeah, it works. So if you click on the planting dates in Florida, here we go. If you're growing arugula in Central Florida, you're going to grow that over the winter. If you're growing, here, let's go down to a really good example here. Cucumbers. Everybody likes to grow cucumbers in Florida and plant them in like May, and they wonder in July why they're dead. It's because you don't plant them then. So you need to plant them early. January is a little early for right here. Well, this is January, and I would not plant my cucumbers in the garden today with a major freeze coming. But definitely February, late February is a good time to start your cucumbers here in Hernando County and get them up and growing and harvest them, because cucumbers do not grow well during June, July, and August here in Florida. The diseases, the disease pressure, the heavy rainfall, humidity, insects are going to be a problem. So this is a really, really good guide to help get you started with your vegetable garden. And if anybody else has any other questions, please go ahead and feel free to put them in the comments, and we'll do our best to answer them. So did you guys have a nice Christmas / New Year's?
I certainly did. Got to see a whole lot of family. I drove so many miles. I swear I spent most of that holiday just driving around. It was good. It's good to see folks you don't get to see all the time.
Yeah, we don't have any family here. So my wife volunteers at Home Assassin, and she worked on Christmas and New Year's so that the younger people could be home with their family. So we kind of enjoy that. Go out to one of the very few restaurants that's open, and have a simple meal and enjoy it. I hate to say it, but Denny's has a turkey and dressing special on Thanksgiving, and it's pretty darn good. It's not a bad thing, and makes a nice place to go because for the most part everybody else is shut down, and it's not that far away. So we had our normal uh, Sands family Christmas, and it's funny because in the 30 some years we've been here, we've had visits from family only 2 or 3 times, period. So I would say we are not what you call a really close family, although everybody would help everybody else. It's just that everybody's off doing their own thing, and I kind of enjoy that, actually. So.
Yeah, normally during winter is when all your family up north wants to come and stay with you, trying to get away from the snow and the polar vortex up north. And
My little brother, he works in New Mexico, and he's been staying with me since before Christmas, and he was saying, man, it is cold because he went out there in like late September, and he was like, it's so hot. And then it took him a month or two, and he's like, it's so cold.
yeah, it gets cold out there, especially at higher elevations. I know we were in northern Arizona once. I mean, even in July on the decent sized mountains, there's still snow at the very top. And in the desert, it gets pretty darn chilly overnight, even during the summer.
Yeah, we went out.
He's out there. He's out there like right on the right near a mountain range. So he's pretty high altitude, but it's southern New Mexico, and it's like, man, you wouldn't expect it because he's in a desert, but he'll send me like a Snapchat with the temperature on it. It's like 12, and I'm like, man, I do not envy he works outside, so it's like, man, whatever you're doing, I'm cool here. I like it here.
Yeah, we went to Vegas at the at Christmas time one year, and I've got pictures standing next to the Joshua trees covered with snow. So they have some pretty nasty weather out there.
Yeah, you don't think it gets cold and snows out west, but it does. So hopefully no snow here in Florida. Although I'm sure if you're up at the very edge of the Panhandle, it's not unusual to get a flurry or a dusting.
In '89, they closed the interstate between Gainesville and Ocala because there was an inch of snow on the interstate.
I read somewhere it's
up north, and that's no problem. Up north, that's just a December or January day. But here in the South, I would not be on the road here with any snow on the ground. I'd be hiding at home.
I read somewhere, and don't fact check me on the exact numbers, but it's like the first time in 40 years or something we've had a snow chance of above like 3 or 4% in Central Florida in a real long time. I think it'd be kind of crazy if it snowed here. I don't even know what to expect.
I had a good friend that was a 70-some year resident of Brooksville and had seen snow once in her life. Only time she ever saw snow. It didn't stick, but it did snow here. So
yeah, thankfully it doesn't happen very often.
I mean, I've seen I've seen like I've seen flurries in like Apalachicola before, but obviously not enough to stick. But that's the only time I've ever seen snow falling. I've only ever seen like the puddles that looks like snow cones on the ground like a few days after.
You haven't missed anything. It's, if you're from up north, snow was fun when you were a kid. You could go sledding and things. But if you're an adult, snow is not a nice thing. And I think it's funny that Lily moved back to a snow-filled area. And it's because the longer you're away, the better that looks in your memory. But memories can be very deceiving.
Yeah, when you're an adult and you have to go out there still in the dark and sweep the snow off your vehicle and use the ice scraper to scrape the ice off the windshield, and even worse if you have to get a snow shovel and like dig out your car because the snow plow came down the street and piled snow up against your car. It's awful. And this is like all before work. And I mean, work is tough enough as it is, even with the kind of weather we normally have here. That's a lot of work before work. So I don't know if I could deal with it. Being retired up north, and you don't have to dig your car out if you don't need to, that might be a little bit different. But I'm like Colby. Anything really below about 50 is just getting too cold.
Yeah, one of the things I've noticed that is been ongoing since the hurricane is the trucks hauling off limbs are still hauling off, and when you start looking now that it's getting to be a little more open, there are a tremendous number of trees that are laying over. You go through Spring Hill, and Spring Hill got very little damage relative to the rest of the county. But you go out in the eastern part of the county, and there's a tremendous number of trees that are down, and all the outlying areas that you wouldn't have expected to have quite as much damage didn't really get a tremendous amount of damage, but they lost a lot of trees. There is probably enough work for the tree people to keep them busy for 2 or 3 more years. And I know at this point I've got about 16 trees down, and I'm just not going to bother taking them out. I don't own a chainsaw that'll cut a bunch of them up, and I just don't feel like that it's going to be worth the effort. But there are a lot of places that people still need a lot of assistance, and it's going to be probably another year before all the residential stuff is taken care of. So if you have trees that are leaning, those trees are not going to straighten back up. So and a lot of trees are starting to show physical distress now from having been rocked over. So the total damage isn't even known yet. It's going to be an awkward position to be in for a lot of people.
We have there's a tree on the corner of my street that I've been, I drive by it every day. So I've been kind of monitoring it, looking, because if it gets any worse, I'm going to have to go knock on those people's house and be like, hey, just to let you know, you want to get rid of this thing, because it's going to be in your living room in the next little bit if you don't take care of it.
Yeah, and weather events like what we have with the hurricanes can cause a lot of long-term damage. So you might have a tree that you think is okay. It might have gotten some damage. It may decline over time. I don't think we've seen the impact from all the flooding and all the areas that were flooded, and it was flooded for anywhere from a number of days up to a number of weeks, and the water recedes and the trees, they look okay. Well, 1, 2, 3 years later, a lot of times those trees will all die, depending on what species of tree they are, because of sitting in water and flood damage and root damage that takes a long time to develop and get really bad. So I know I've spoken with people in the past from other situations. If they have a tree that they say all of a sudden died, I ask them, in the last couple of years, have you had a standing water situation or flooding? And I also ask about any work they've had done in their yard, replacing a septic system or a sidewalk or putting in a driveway where they've had large equipment there, or they've done a lot of digging and they've taken out some of the roots from that tree. That will cause problems long term also. So it's going to be a long term problem.
Yeah, something I've noticed is that with the larger the plant, the longer it's going to take for any type of standing water damage or mechanical damage, especially, to actually show up. Is it's not like some little some little tiny weed. Yeah, if you step on it, you crush it up real good, it might die. But a tree, it might die like tomorrow. But the tree, it can take, like you said, even years sometimes before that mechanical damage is actually going to show any symptoms at all.
And people think that the tree is fine. Time goes by, 1, 2, 3 years down the road. I love it when people say, my tree looked great yesterday and it died overnight. I walked out this morning and the whole thing is dead. It's like, it probably happened a little bit longer than that. You just didn't really notice it. But trees will kind of, if they have damage to the roots, they will struggle long term. And then usually during the height of summer, the root system gets to the point where it can't draw water all the way up to the very, very top of the tree. So it'll start to wilt and look bad from the top, move downwards a little bit, or that tree is so stressed that now all of a sudden, if there's any bark beetles in the neighborhood, and there always are during the summer, they always seek out the most stressed, weakest tree to attack. And boom, the beetles will attack your tree, and all they do is they just finish it off. They're not, the stage was already set. Your tree's time was coming. The beetles just finish it off. Beetles rarely kill perfectly healthy, well cared for, just fine trees. In some cases they do. We do have some invasive bark beetles that kill perfectly healthy trees. Not so much in Florida, more up north. But as a general rule, if you have a problem with bark beetles, the beetles just finish the tree off. It already had serious problems before that was going to lead to a dead tree.
If your tree dies overnight, it's probably like your neighbor cut it down or it got struck by lightning or something. It's not a super common occurrence for it to die.
Yes, if they get hit by lightning, they really do die overnight.
Yeah.
I like and I've seen videos on social media before of like a palm tree getting hit by lightning and it bursts into flames. That's kind of scary. If your palm tree gets hit by lightning, it is a goner. It is dead. It will be dead first thing tomorrow morning, and beetles will flock to it and feast on it and finish it off. But that tree, you need to start calling and getting prices on palm tree removal that day. Your palm tree is not there's nothing you can do to fix it back up.
My great grandpa for so long. So we had pasture, right? And there's these big old oak trees that are out there. And, it's a tall thing in a pasture. They get struck by lightning. And one of his favorite things to do after it got struck by lightning, because he didn't want to pay anybody to take it down, he just burn it. He burned the whole tree. And I was like, I don't know that's, I suppose. And then so it's kind of looked a little scary. There's all these trees that got struck by lightning that had some damage, but then they're just dead and burned. It was kind of like a little terrifying. I'm sure if you drove by and you didn't know why all the trees were like that.
Yes, we don't recommend people go out there and set their dead or damaged trees on fire. There's a lot of other things they used to do a long time ago that we don't recommend nowadays either.
That's an understatement.
Yeah.
So we have a question here. Sorry, Bassem, we weren't trying to ignore you or push you off. But Bassem asked a really good question. And this kind of goes with composting and soil additives. He asked, can I add ashes to my garden without changing the pH of the soil? Yes and no. If you add a reasonable amount of ashes, wood ashes, to your garden, it's not going to change the pH. If you add a ton of ashes to your garden, it will raise the pH of your soil. So keep it in moderation. People, when we're doing composting classes, will ask, can I add wood ashes to my compost? Yes, that's a very good additive, very high in potassium, but don't add too much. So just a small amount of clean wood ashes. If you burn, let's say, pressure treated wood pallets or junk wood, or obviously pressure treated wood, or drywall, construction junk, or debris, you don't want to compost that. But if you have a fire pit in your backyard, and some of those trees, some of Colby's trees that died and fell over, you cut up and use for firewood, have a fire out there when the temperature gets down to the upper teens, you could use those ashes just fine, either directly in your garden or in your compost, just in moderation. Small amounts, not too much.
Yeah. The old pressure treated lumber uh, was pressure treated with arsenic, and the ashes do tend to concentrate the arsenic from a large area, not much of a problem, down to a very small area that could be a problem. So uh, if you're burning pressure treated lumber, uh, and it's older pressure treated lumber, you really don't want to use the ashes around anything that could be edible.
Yeah, and old railroad ties were soaked in creosote, and so were telephone poles. I remember when I was a kid, telephone poles up in Maryland had tar on them or in them, because you could roll up the tar and make a little tar ball. Probably not the safest thing to do. Um, I have somewhere a book that I inherited here at the office on pest control. And it was published in like right after World War II in like 1946 or 47. And some of the recommendations in there are amazing. And there are things that we do not recommend anymore. A lot of references in it to using DDT for controlling different various pests. Controlling ants says use DDT. Who would have thought? We don't do that anymore. And uh, using things like diesel fuel and creosote and tar and DDT. I guess at this point, your great grandparents or great great grandparents used them. We don't use those things anymore. But they are still potentially out there. So if you find, a very, very old house, a very old structure, I hate to imagine how many people have a backyard shed. And if you dig way, way, way in the back of that shed and you find that old bottle of insecticide that your, grandpa or great grandpa used to get rid of aphids on his corn, goodness knows exactly what's in that bottle. Don't use those things. If you have any questions, you find a bottle of something you don't know what it is, contact us directly. You can contact I know that our Hernando County landfill has ways that you could drop materials like that off and get them taken care of. Don't mix it up and spray it. Check into it first before you have anything to do with it. So I got a question here from Lori. Good morning, Lori. Lori says, I can no longer pick the weeds around my fruit trees. What is your advice? Is wood bark okay around them? How do I know if I have greening in my citrus tree? So that's at least 4 different questions there that we can unpack. So I'll start with, I'm not sure why you can't pick the weeds around your fruit trees. Maybe you just have too many weeds there, or you do like I do a lot of times and let it go for a long time, and then you go out there and look, it's like, oh, what am I going to do with all these weeds? They're so thick and full and long, I can't really pull them up. Best thing to do for starters is to physically dig them up or physically pull them up to kind of get a clean slate and then take it from there. And is wood bark okay around them? Any kind of traditional mulch, wood chip mulch is just fine for fruit trees, with the exception of citrus. And I'll let Bernie talk about that one. But you need to keep in mind, if you have fruit trees and you're using wood chip mulch, that's just great. Make sure that mulch is not right up against the trunk of the tree, because if you keep the trunk of the tree wet, it's going to get moldy, and it's probably going to develop a fungal or bacterial problem and get a rot. So pull mulch back a couple inches from the trunk, at least a few inches, but wood chip mulch is fine for most fruit trees, not citrus. So Bernie, why don't we mulch citrus trees?
They don't like any competition under the tree. But the truth is, that's where you use Roundup. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with Roundup under the trees. And Roundup is absorbed by the green. I understood that. I was going to mention that. Yeah, these young guys don't understand what happens. When you get to be my age and a few other people's age, you can't bend over and pick them up. But there's just no way that you can go out there. If you get down to where you can actually pull the weeds, then you have to have somebody come along and pick you back up. So I don't do it. And that like I say, Roundup works beautiful. Roundup is only absorbed by the green parts of plants. So if you want to clean around the trees with Roundup, that's fine. That works great. Roundup has got another group of attorneys going after it again. The attorneys aren't claiming that Roundup causes cancer. What they're claiming is the instructions don't say it's a probable carcinogen, and for that, not having that warning, they must pay you. So anyway, don't worry about Roundup being a problem. If you spray it small amounts around the trees and you don't drink the stuff, use some reasonable precautions. Use long pants, wear shoes.
Follow the directions. It's all there on the label.
What it says on the label.
PPE, wear your gloves, especially. That one's on there. People don't like to do it, but
wear your eye protection also when you're mixing stuff. Things splash. So
anyway, that pretty well takes care of the problem around the trees. Now, greening is a real easy thing to determine after a while. Initially, you look at the leaf and you look for the yellow spots on the leaf. And if the yellow spots are symmetrical about the mid vein of the leaf, in other words, you have a little blob on the right, you have a little blob on the left, and they're basically in the same place. If you folded the leaf, these patches would overlap each other. That is generally some kind of nutritional thing. But if it has big blotches that are not symmetrical, it has a blotch at the lower part on the right side of the leaf and a blotch on the upper part on the left side of the leaf, that's the kind of thing, the non-symmetrical yellow patches on the leaf is the initial outlook for greening. That that's a disease that came from China, has a Chinese name, Honglongbing, and it translates as the yellow dragon, and it's because the leaves turn yellow and you have an area on the tree with these yellow leaves, and the yellowing is asymmetrical. So, but that's kind of tricky because you look at it and unless you've done this a lot, it's hard to be sure that it isn't nutritional. If it is greening, the tree will deteriorate, and it will continue to deteriorate. And depending on how well you take care of the tree, it could be a relatively short period of time less than 6 months from the initial yellowing to as much as 5 or 6 years. Anyway, when the fruit becomes unusable or the tree stops producing fruit, you need to get rid of the tree. At this point, there isn't any reason to rush out and get rid of the tree. It's not going to prevent the spread of the disease. The disease is so common that you're not going to be able to do anything to stop the spread. The little insect is going to hit your tree. As a general rule, if you have a citrus tree, you will have greening. I mean, it's almost a guarantee. If you have a tree that lasts forever, you know, it goes through its normal 25 years life cycle and doesn't get it, in today's age, that's almost a miracle. So the belief is if you're in our area south, you will have citrus greening, and the initial outlook is, or the initial indications are these non-symmetrical spots on the leaves. So,
And I looked and found that we have a new publication on citrus greening. This is for citrus production guide, but I mean, you know, it applies to homeowners also. And it's 2024-25 guide. And this thing looks like it has a ton of information and links. A link to root health management. That's very, very important. How to deal with young trees and new plantings, information on Asian citrus psyllids, links to other publications. You know, if you get a small new citrus tree, you can get a protective cover for it. They've done a lot of research on those, and that keeps those insects off of it and at least postpones your tree getting citrus greening. So this looks like, wow, this looks like a very thorough guide here. You can inject your tree with oxytetracycline. We don't necessarily recommend that for homeowners, but if you like to find out what the heck that is, there's links to that. So a lot of really good information here online. And I put a link to that publication in the comments. And Barney, if you go out and buy a typical 3-gallon citrus tree at, you know, a big box store and plant it, about how many years does it take before you're getting fruit?
well, the tree will probably be 2 years old then, maybe 3 years old when you get it. And the normal time to legitimate fruiting is 4 to 7 years. So the tree will probably start producing fruit as soon as it's 3 foot, 4 foot tall. You don't really want it to fruit. Ideally, if the tree isn't taller than you are, you probably should dump the fruit and let it put its energy into growth rather than fruiting. Once the tree is as big as you are, start producing fruit, and the growth will slow down if it's fruiting. So that's you know, the biggest thing is don't go out and buy a $200 citrus tree, because a $200 citrus tree will develop greening just like a $50 or a $25 tree will. And they all will develop it, and they all will die from it. And, you know, it's just, it doesn't make sense. You're playing Russian roulette. The tree will go from 1 year to probably 6 years before it starts to show symptoms of greening. So,
A couple things I wanted to touch on that you talked about. That it being some kind of disease versus a nutritional deficit. That's not just on citrus trees. That's on just about anything. If you have symmetrical abnormalities in the leaf, normally that is some kind of nutritional thing, or it's even mechanical damage can cause that. And then if it's kind of more sporadic. There's not really a pattern to it. That is, some other kind of disease issue, insect issue, something like that. The other thing I wanted to mention, I'm really glad you mentioned that glyphosate was okay, because I feel like I tend to tell people to dump it on there, but really the reason why glyphosate's okay, and this is goes for multiple other herbicides, is glyphosate, Roundup, is what's called a non-residual herbicide. Does not have soil activity. So those ones that don't have soil activity are the ones that, like Bernie said, they're only working on the green parts of the plant that you spray it on. Those are the ones that don't have, they don't have any like kind of shotgun effect on other stuff that you're not actually spraying. So as long as you're careful with what you're spraying, you're only affecting your your intended target. So there's other herbicides, things like imazapyr, other things like that do have soil activity, and there's purposes for those types of things. But in this situation where you want to be very pointed, you want something without soil activity and non-residual herbicide, something like glyphosate. Just want to touch on kind of why glyphosate was okay there in that situation.
Glyphosate has a really short reentry period. If you're putting livestock on, I think it's only 1 or 2 days. That means that the effects of glyphosate disappear pretty quick as far as animals being affected by it. The microbes in the soil really take Roundup out pretty quick. So once it hits the soil, it becomes very ineffective very, very fast, and the products break down pretty quick. Although there are a couple that do carry over and can eventually be detected in the water occasionally, but those products also are not harmful in the classic sense. So they don't really alter the chromosomal content of your DNA, and those are the things that you really have to be careful of. And there's so many of the insecticides and pesticides and herbicides that do alter chromosomes, and once they do that, they make those unavailable to the average person for a very specific reason. It's a couple, I don't know what, it's $250 to take the test. Kind of guarantees that you understand what the danger is. So the people that are doing the spraying and applying those really bad chemicals understand and really take care of themselves. I used to work for a company that did aerial application, and the people loading the airplanes and the people that were loading the trucks and handling the chemicals wore all kinds of protective gear. Little guy that's using the flag, depending on some of the chemicals, because the flag man that was marking the fields would stand a chance of being sprayed from the overspray. He really had some fancy suits. I mean, they had outfits that totally covered them. They had masks. He's getting all of his air from a fancy situation. Those products are not available for a really good reason. So when your friend recommends or says, "Hey, I'll get some of this from my aunt, my uncle that's got a farm, and we can use it," don't use those products. If you get a product and you don't have the label and you don't have what it takes, the PPE, the protection equipment, don't mess with that stuff. Roundup doesn't affect bees at all.
Well, there is a caveat to that. The thing is Roundup, if you were to coat an actual bee with Roundup, the bee would not do very well. But the reason has nothing to do with the glyphosate. It's actually the surfactant, the inerts, the things that don't actually kill the plants, the soaps and stuff. It's the same way that insecticidal soap kills insects. It's because it clogs up their they can't breathe, basically. So don't spray it.
Spray the bees,
don't spray it. I just wanted to,
there are some pesticides that bees are especially sensitive to, and if you read the label, it has a special section on it that it's called the bee label. So a lot of pesticides do have a B label component of their label that has special warnings about don't use this on or near plants that are flowering or are going to be flowering anytime soon. So you want to follow those directions. But Roundup would not, as a general rule, if you're using it anywhere near or on flowering weeds, you probably want to do it very, very late in the day, right before dark. Bees go to bed after a certain time. So it's generally, there's very, very few bees out right before dark. So, yeah.
Roundup.
Laura, you don't want to be spraying the bees directly with anything, really. They're not going to like it.
Yeah, all of the neonicotinoids are systemic, and they tend to make the flowers poison. Roundup does not. Or the nectar and stuff in the flower does not absorb the Roundup. So are there any varieties of orange tree that are resistant? Honeybell and
It's Sugar Bell.
Sugar Bell.
The name of the variety is Sugar Bell, sugar Belle. And you can, if you Google that, there are nurseries. There's one up in Brightleaf up in Lake Panasoffkee that we have gotten trees from before. Very, very nice people. You can order one online, have it shipped directly to your house. And that's a variety that is resistant to citrus greening. And they have other varieties they're working on. I don't think any of them technically are really available to the public yet, but they will be very soon. And there's a number of different varieties.
And don't forget finger lime. That is an opportunity to be in the really exotic citrus early. It's a really neat plant, and it's very resistant. It gets it, but it doesn't seem to bother it. It doesn't affect the fruit. So
my finger lime tree looks great. I guess I'm going to have to cover it if it gets down to like 18 degrees. So
yeah.
But the cold that we've gotten so far, which has been right about freezing, maybe a degree above, hasn't bothered it at all. Looks great, growing slowly, but looks great. And it looks like coming on here today, we have been successful. We have helped to save a marriage. So thank you so much, Lori. We're more than happy to help here. And thank you so much for tuning in and watching. I'm going to start showing our contact information. So for anybody watching us live or watching this as a recording, there is my email address. Feel free, if you have a lawn and garden or fruit tree or citrus or whatever question, shoot me an email with lots of pictures. If you'd like to contact our office, there's the phone number. If you call here on a Thursday, chances are Teresa's going to answer and she'll put you through to Bernie. Bernie is here on Thursdays to help answer your questions. If you're not watching us through Facebook, we encourage you to follow us on Facebook. We have a lot of activities and classes and webinars and special activities in our nursery. We have Arbor Day coming up. We're going to have Earth Day coming up in April before you know it. And everything you need to know about all those is going to be on our Facebook page under events. So as soon as I figure out what the heck is going on, I put it on a Facebook event so that you can know what's going on. Our Master Gardeners have a nursery. There is the address. They are there on Wednesdays and Saturdays, 8:30 in the morning until noon. If it is horribly cold, they will either not open or they will open a little bit late. If it's 18 degrees out there one morning, they're not going to be out there, and I'm not going to be out there at 8:30 in the morning. Either I'm staying at home or in the car with the heater going on, or where they're going to go into the nursery late. So once again, you can always follow us on Facebook. The Master Gardeners, their nursery has a Facebook page also that you can follow to find out about whether they're open or closed any given day. We have a whole bunch of previously recorded classes on Hernando County Government's YouTube channel. So go ahead and go to YouTube, use the little search bar up top, look up Hernando County Government and find their channel and all of our recording classes that way. And here is Colby's very, very long email address if you want to get a hold of him directly, or his link tree. And Colby, what is on your link tree?
So right now, this is going to give you all of the information you need to sign up for anything that I'm doing. So right now, that is Rainbow Workshops. We have one coming up on January the 10th. The sign-up process for those have changed. So if you've heard about it or went through the process before, now you have to email me or call me. All my contact information can be found there. The other thing that's on there right now is our Water Awareness Speaker Series, which is something we're bringing back. We hadn't done it previously since Lily was here. So that's just different speakers every month. The first month will be yours truly and Dr. Lester. We're going to be talking about winter vegetable gardening and landscape protection for cold weather. And there's refreshments, all kinds of goodies, that kind of thing. So I encourage everybody to check that out.
So a lot of exciting things coming up this new year. Spring is always a very, very busy time of year for us. And Lori, you are so very welcome. And Bassem, like always, thank you so much for tuning in live and asking us questions. Because if you guys weren't here, we probably would have gotten bored a long time ago and we wouldn't be here also. But we're still here. And as a matter of fact, coming up in early April, you need to start thinking of some kind of plans. We are going to have our 5-year anniversary of this activity. 5 years of the almost weekly virtual plant clinic. So I expect to get an award from somebody. I'm going to have to start telling my superiors about that. And we'll do something. Teresa always thinks of something really, really interesting, like coming in with something that explodes or pops and scaring the you-know-what out of me while I'm live, or doing something. So we're going to start thinking about that. But we should all be back here again next week. Let me double check. Yes, I will be here next week. So Bernie should be here next week. Colby, I know that you're not going to be with us here one Thursday coming up soon.
I don't think that's actually till March, because I missed a couple weeks ago. I had a scheduling conflict, but no, I'm getting married in March, so I will not be here during that.
We'll let you off. We won't even try to broadcast live from the wedding or anything. We'll give you a break. So hey everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. Like I said, we'll be back here again next Thursday. Until then, watch the weather, stay warm, stay safe, and if you have any questions, go ahead and contact us. Otherwise, pop back on here next Thursday morning at 10 a.m. and hopefully we will see all of you here back then. So until then, everybody have a great week. Bye.